Shabbat Shalom, Acharei Kodesh. So we are at an interesting double parsha this week, Acharei Kedoshim, which literally translates to after the death, holiness. What are we talking about? What is after the death? After the death are the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's two sons. And we learned about that last week or a couple weeks ago in Shmini, and now we kind of come back to it. There's an old saying in Judaism, and they use this double parsha to say, they said, Acharei mot, after someone dies, they become holy. Or in other words, some of the things that we thought about them, regretted about them, the negative things kind of wash away in a certain sense. I like to look at it in a different way as far as how, as Jews, we view this concept, Acharei mot Kedoshim. What do we do after death, after loss? And I bring this up because as the pandemic, the realities of this pandemic are becoming aware to us, and the things that we kind of took for granted, that over the summer, kids would have summer camp, or that many people are facing smachot, bar mitzvahs, weddings that have to be postponed. What do we do with that? How do we deal with loss? And that is one thing that we have to work on. It's one of the things that's really important in Judaism. And one of the ways we do it is with holiness. I wanted to share a story by Rabbi Daniel Gordis, who is in Israel. He tells a story of Staff Sergeant Devere Emanuel. Devere was the first casualty of Operation Cast Lead, which was an operation launched by Israel in the summer of 2009. And it was into Gaza, and it was meant to put a stop to the thousands of rockets that were being shot over. This week, we heard from Donnie Fogel, who was also a staff sergeant in the IDF. Now it lives in Virginia, and he shared his story about being in a tank unit in 2014 in Gaza. So this staff sergeant, Devere, lost his life to a Hamas mortar fire just as he entered Gaza at the beginning of the offensive. His mother's name is Dahlia. And about a year after his death, this year of mourning, their family began to live again. And a week later, she found herself in the bleachers of a concert, and she's waiting with her daughter for an Israeli rock concert to begin. And suddenly, Dahlia felt someone touch her shoulder. She turned around, she sees this little boy, blonde hair, blue eyes, and a kindergarten teacher by profession. Dahlia was immediately drawn to the boy, and as they began to speak, she'd ask him if he'd like to sit next to her. By now, the boy's mother had seen what was unfolding. She called over to him. She said, Eshel, why don't you come back here and sit next to me? And Devere. Devere was the boy's little brother. Devere was about 6 months old. Dahlia, the mother of the soldier, looks around to the mother of the baby and said, what'd you say his name was? And she said, Devere. And Dahlia asked, well, how old is Devere? And she said, he's 6 months old. She says, forgive me for asking, but was he born after Cast Lead or before? She said, well, after. And then Dahlia said, please forgive me, but why'd you name him Devere? And the mother said, because the first soldier killed in Operation Cast Lead was named Devere. And his story touched us, and we decided to name our son after him. And Dahlia paused, and she said, this may sound unbelievable to you, but I am that soldier's mother. I am Devere's mother. The young couple, her name was Shiri, the mother, and her husband, Benny, they had some medical problems with the baby. And although they intended to call Devere's mother Dahlia, they never did. And we see here that life took its own course. The two women, Dahlia and Shiri, the mother of the baby, they developed an extraordinary bond. One woman was religious, one secular. One had lost a son named Devere. One had gained a son named Devere. They were unconnected just a year before that. Then their lives became connected. Someone hearing this story, and Rabbi Gordis wrote this, said, this is an Israeli story par excellence. And then he said, no, it's the Jewish story. Parshat Kedoshim, the second half of this week's reading, drives home, and I want to quote one of my teachers, Chancellor Arnie Eisen. He wrote the following. He said, it drives home the promise of life with a capital L, going back and forth among ritual and ethical injunctions, ever uniting the personal with the collective, the self and the community, service of God and service of humanity. Then we read this famous line, Kedoshim tiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. So we see here this idea, this commandment. What does it mean to be holy? He says that holiness is meant to pervade all of daily behavior. It's not to just inhabit the high points of experiences only, the high points of life. Love means reaching out toward neighbors and the world with the same care, regard, and generosity we normally reserve for ourselves and those closest to us. In this parsha we read, Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, shall love your neighbor as yourself. What do we do after loss? We love more. How do we respond to disappointment? Disappointment of futures that we envision that will not happen. We respond with holiness, by living holy lives, by reaching out to others. And so I hope that you can join us this Shabbat as we journey into Shabbat Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. And then we have an action-packed week with a lot of events coming up. Please look at your emails for it, especially Wednesday night. We have the opportunity to learn from Hava Holzhauer, one of our Chaverim, one of our congregants, who's going to talk about what it's like to be Jewish on campus today. She works in a university in Rochester, the head of a department, their new department. She's going to share her reflections on a year being in a university. And Thursday, we have a healing service at 6:30 p.m. And I'll be teaching two classes, one at Lunch and Learn at 12 and after the healing service at 7:30. And it's called Second Chances, Canceled Graduations and Milestones and Second Chances. And insight how we can move on from loss, from the holiday, the little known holiday of Pesach Sheni. So I hope you can join us for those events and many more. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to seeing you tonight at 6:15, tomorrow morning at 9:30.